You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
The source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high. A lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar M. Khatib. What's going on, everybody? It's January, and there's a couple things that happen every year in our industry in January. The first, of course, is the new year. The second is JP Morgan Healthcare. And the third is Scott Huennekens' triumphant return to the show to give his outlook for the year and review of the previous year. Scott was one of my earlier guests 3 years ago now on the show, and we kind of made a tradition of having him on the show in January to kind of talk about learnings from JP Morgan this year. We were both able to attend, talk about the previous year when it comes to the market and funding, and then do an outlook for the year. So we always have a great time together. If you're new to the show and maybe new to Scott, I don't know how you haven't heard of Scott. Let me tell you a little bit about him. So Scott is a former MedTech CEO, but lifetime entrepreneur. In my opinion, he's an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. There's very few people that I know who, after having such an illustrious career, have the energy to sit on so many different companies and boards. And it's just because the guy was just built to do this. He's a chairperson, board member, and investor, and he's been involved in 20 plus startups, growth, and public companies who, if you put them all together, had a market valuation of over $30 billion. So it's kind of rare to have somebody like this who was entrepreneur, CEO, investor, board and chairperson, and sits across so many different companies. So he sits in a really high vantage point to give really interesting insights on the industry. So we kind of talk about last year, when we could do a little bit of an outlook for this year as well. It's a great episode. You're going to have a lot of fun listening to it. On that same token, let's talk about something that isn't so fun. We're getting up to March when our industry's best and most premium event happens, which is the LSI USA Emerging MedTech Summit. It's an amazing investor summit. It happens March 18th to the 22nd in Waldorf, Astoria. So what's the bad part about it? The bad part about it is 1 month before, so many of you will blow up my email inbox and my message inbox on LinkedIn and find a way to get my cell phone and text me to see if I know somebody at LSI to give you an extra ticket or for you to get a ticket. I just want to give this announcement right now. 1, I will be there this year. I never miss that meeting. Number 2, they reach capacity because this is being held at the most luxurious location in Southern California at the Waldorf Astoria Monarch Beach Resort. So there's only so much room. So they reach capacity fast. And every year, I think they're reaching capacity, farther out. So a couple of years ago, it used to be a month out. Last year, I think they reached capacity 2 months out because people started messaging me and I checked and they reached capacity. They can't make any more room. This year, the same thing is going to happen. So please, if you are a founder, if you're a MedTech CEO, if you're in the startup space, period, you have to be at this meeting. It's one of the best weeks of the year. I love it. There's over 250 presenting companies. You have amazing panels. Big shout out to my boy, Henry Peck, who does a great job with the LSI team to put together these really interesting panels. They're kind of called unpanels because of the format that they have. Really interesting topics, right? So you get to hear from VCs, and strategics attend this meeting as well. You have Boston Scientific, Medtronic, J&J, the list goes on. So anybody who's anybody at this is going to be at this meeting. And personally, it's such a great meeting. I take my wife and kid to it. Okay. So with that being said, get ahead of it. Don't be one of those people who's going to be left out because I'm not going to be able to help you. All right. They are going to reach capacity really soon. So to learn more and more importantly, get your spot and get your ticket for this event, go to lifesciencemarketresearch.com or just Google LSI USA 2024 and get your ticket quickly. I'm pretty sure the presenting slots are already gone. Maybe they have a few left, but definitely as an attendee, it doesn't get any better than that meeting. I absolutely love it. I'm willing to die on that hill. This is the best meeting that our industry has. And I say this and promote it because I just want to I want to put pressure on Scott Pantel to do more of these every year. But that being said, be sure to go and just get your ticket. If you're a founder, you need to be there. Okay. If you're a startup founder and you're struggling to get some traction, you're trying to raise awareness with investors, maybe you're even trying to commercialize and you're having trouble finding those early adopters. Well, if you believe in the power of great dynamic content and social media, we want to work with you. My company, Khatib & Co., works with many companies and startups to help them raise awareness with investors, but also get traction to attract those early adopters to adopt their technology, give feedback to the product team. We know how important that is. So if you want to learn more, go to my website, khatibandco.com, and schedule time with me and see if you qualify to work alongside my company. So with that being said, let's get on to our episode with Scott Huennekens. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And, the show, we're actually starting, I just realized, our third year. And in January, there's a few things that happen. Number one, we have the JP Morgan conference. The other thing is that we have one of our original guests, Scott Huennekens, coming on. This is his third time on the show. And I think it's become sort of this tradition. It's like you have Christmas, you have JP Morgan, and then Scott Huennekens comes on, the state of MedTech, to give an outlook for 2024. So Scott, considering how busy you are and everything, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, it's great to be here. Do I get to share my New Year's resolutions as well, or just stick to business?
I'd love to hear your New Year's resolutions. Do you do New Year's resolutions, or do you have anything big for the year?
I don't do New Year's resolutions, but I've for years and years and years had this kind of 5-year plan that I do across 8 categories, and then it has a umbrella long-term goals, a lot like what you do for business, and then I check in on it quarterly, and then give myself an annual scorecard report and update relative to what I want to accomplish the next 5 years, and build a plan around that and processes. And it's funny, I've mentored a lot of people over the years, and I often start with what's your goal? And a lot of times people who run businesses and have these processes they use for business don't really apply them to themselves, not just to their work goals, but to their family goals, financial, community, spiritual, physical, mental, et cetera. So I do update that every January. And so as I turn 60 in April this year, thinking about what's going to be different in my 60s versus my 50s has been something front and center on my mind.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. For me, I was just reflecting on this just recently. So like I have, even for my small business, like KPIs and goals and everything. And, just recently, I had been traveling a little bit, and, my wife kind of expressed that she wasn't, it was kind of like, a little bit hard on her. And I was talking to another entrepreneur about it. And I was like, I need to address this and everything. And he asked me a really good question. He's like, hey, you have goals for your business, right? I'm like, I do. He's like, do you have like goals and like weekly check-ins for like your family and everything? I'm like, I don't. And so like, it never occurred to me. So actually I sat down with my wife, and we're going to have like a, every night we get together and we have, a little cocoa together and get ready for bed. But I'm actually adding it to my calendar where it's like, hey, this is 1 hour where we're going to sit down, and it's not like we're going to actually have a check-in and kind of roll through like what's going on with the family and like what things we need to address. Because otherwise you just kind of go with emotions, right? So I think that's great that you do that.
No, and I don't. It's a super important point. I don't do it alone. I do my first pass, and then historically, I would also then go through it with my wife relative to what her objectives were, because the two need to fit together. And I would share it. I've shared it with my children over the years as well. And then even like running businesses, I would often share my annual plan for the business with my wife at the quarterly objectives, and have her listen in on our quarterly earnings calls back during the volcano days. And she just would understand better kind of what was going on in the business, where we were stage wise, and helped us communicate and relate. Because, as you've heard me say before, there are no bumps in the road. That is the road. And if your wife and your spouse and others don't know some of the challenges you're facing there, it's hard for them to support you, understand you, and the like. So I think it's a great practice. I personally would expand it a little bit, have a multi-year goal, some annual goals, and share those also with her. I'm sure you guys have some objectives for your family.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, on a separate note, think about it. I'd love to have you back on just to talk about how you structure that and everything. I think that can help so many entrepreneurs and CEOs, because it's one of the things like no one will disagree with it, but I don't know of any places or resources where somebody actually walked it through, and especially at your level, which is a good segue.
Happy to do that. Like a number of the people I've mentioned over the years, part of the requirement was they had to do some semblance of this. Mine's a little maybe more involved than others, and I'm in YPO. Well, I'm over 50 now. I'm hitting 60, so I'm in WPO, and everyone in our YPO forum also has this 5-year plan, and it's a way for us to all communicate with each other and support each other achieving your objectives. On my management teams, I would ask people to have a rough outline of that so we could support each other and share it as well, which built teamwork and understanding and trust.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm going to definitely have you back on that. And on a separate note, I'll email you after this. I'd love if you had any templates for this, because for me, I'm going through it for my business, but I was trying to find something that would help like for my entire life. And it shortcuts my trust factor if it's coming from somebody that I respect and know. So yeah, that I would love to have you back on for that. So
back
before
to MedTech in 2024.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think, one of the reasons why I love having you on is there's a few people in our industry who have, I want to call it the level of energy to do what you're doing. You're on multiple, boards and companies. You're active, in the industry. You go to these events and everything. And so you sort of sit in a very interesting place. And so JP Morgan is always a good gut check, for the industry. And so having come from it, there was a few things that stuck out in my mind. Maybe, we'll start with you. Like, what were some key themes that sort of stood out to you this year compared to, let's say, how last year ended?
Well, I think that Xi should go to San Francisco every time right before JP Morgan, because
I agree. It was a different
I've never
city.
seen the streets cleaner, the city looking
Seriously.
nicer. It was amazing.
It
So
was
I think
amazing.
that's the best demonstrated practice for JP Morgan going forward.
I completely agree. I even called Henry Peck, and because he lives in San Francisco, I was like, this is kind of blowing up on the internet. He's like, dude, it's true. He's like, I don't know what happened. He's like, it's like a completely different city. It's so clean and nice now. I'm like, so you're saying that they can do this?
Yeah, so I think that put everybody in a better frame of mind relative to the new year and a new start. It felt like that. I think it's interesting, as you said. I'm a little bit unique in that, I'm an advisor and investor in Series A and B companies. I'm on the boards of and executive chairman of a number of companies in that kind of Series C, D, commercializing, preparing to go public. I'm on the board of a few companies that have gone public in the last couple of years that are in the growth stage. That's kind of bucket C. And then, on the board of some larger companies that are, multinational, and billion to 3 billion in revenue, like Invista, previously like Nuvasive, which just merged with Globus. So I think I saw three things that were encouraging for me. I mean, look, there were some big announcements of some transactions. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think where over the last 2 years, we talked about it. I think last year there was a disconnect on valuation as people anchor to old values versus new values. Interest rates are changing a lot, like when you go to sell a house and people anchor to what their house could have sold for, and the market's different now, and then markets are frozen. That was a little bit the case, and I think with some sizable transactions that you saw announced, there, whether it's been over the last 6 months, like a J&J and Abiomed, a Globus and Nuvasive, like J&J, even like buying Laminar, which is an earlier stage company, the Axonics Boston deal. Those are, I think, all positive signs that we need to take place, and are, I think, probably precursors to IPO markets and the like opening up as you go forward. I think the second thing is you're seeing companies get funded, and I've been involved over the last couple of months with some larger financings, like $80+ million financing at Elucid. Also on Target, who I joined their board, we did a $30 million financing with strategics as well as VCs, and we had meetings at JP Morgan that were extremely positive, leading into our commercialization and financing in the second half of the year. So I think that commercial stage company, and I'm on the board at Capel, and we had a number of really positive meetings there as we're growing in the stroke area. So markets seem to be unlocking a bit. People aren't just what I would call industrial tourists, where they're just taking meetings at JP Morgan to be updated or prove that they're in the flow. They're actually looking to transact, it seemed. And then the third thing was just this general sense of excitement around where MedTech is going and what I call that MedTech 3.0 world. A lot of interest around companies with AI, robotics, convergence of technology advancements into new solutions, whether that creates new service models. I went to this other meeting at Snowberg right before JP Morgan that was more service oriented, but a lot of these service businesses are enabled by advancements in MedTech technology. So, I that meeting coupled with JP Morgan got me excited about some of these digitally enabled service businesses that are software oriented or device enabled as well. So those generally, I think we're in a better place than what we were when obviously things are kind of crazy, easy money, everything's getting funded, and a lot of quality stuff's not. It is too many things are getting funded that aren't of quality, and then you have some negative backlash, and then we went to risk off, which obviously is not good for the industry or patients. So I feel like we're landing hopefully in a sustainable spot here in the middle, and JP Morgan was a positive step forward in that regard.
I completely agree. I think like last year, if you remember, the whole week was like raining and like a monsoon, and it was kind of like a foreshadowing of what the year was going to be like. Just to kind of like put in perspective for our audience, so Jonathan Norris, who's a managing director over HSBC, and his team put together a great report. So in terms of like first financing, just for 2023, last year first financing was down 18% compared to 2022, and then down 40% to 2021. I think that's the year that we saw a lot of money being thrown around post-COVID, a lot of inflated valuations. But one of the things that they mentioned anecdotally was that during 2023, they saw that there was more corporate investors engaged in first financing deals. And it feels like maybe that's some of these acquisitions are a good sign of that. The Axonics acquisition was exciting to see because it kind of shows that Boston Scientific is looking to compete directly now with Medtronic. Do you feel like this year there's going to be more activity from the corporates and strategics in terms of these first financing deals versus the VCs, or do you think it's going to be a mix?
Yeah, I see three things happening with strategics. We talked about one. They need to continue, as we've talked about in the past, increase their weighted average growth rate of markets that they're in. And Boston Scientific has done a fantastic job of that, of getting out of segments with lower growth, moving into segments with higher growth, getting technologies in those space. So then they've produced above average medtech growth rates. And we've done the same thing in Envista and Dental, where we've exited lower growth, moving into higher growth segments where we feel like we can be number one or number two in those segments. So I think that entails two things. One is you're going to see them continue to buy assets for movement into those weighted average growth areas, and then you're going to see them divest businesses generally into private equity that are businesses of scale, but also have lower weighted average growth rate markets and businesses. So, I mean, or where they feel like it's not strategic. So if that's J&J with, a Clarient, or all the stuff that, like Baxter has done stuff, and ZimVie. And
I was going to say, would you consider the spin out of their spine kind of an example of that?
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're going to see strategics do those two things. And then also, some of them have become more active in, I think I'm looking here at my sheet of paper, in the 5 private deals that I'm involved in 4 of them, there are strategic investors in those, whether it's J&J or it's Olympus, et cetera. So I think that's something that's historically been the case, and I think will continue to have their finger and pulse on these. And then you're seeing things, a fourth bucket I would add would be these build to buys or off balance sheet kind of transactions. So I'm on the board at Verinex, where we're outsourced R&D, clinical, regulatory, and you see strategics have tremendous amount of headroom on their balance sheets. They don't have as much headroom on their income statements. So if you can put together structural deals, back to like what we did at Verb with J&J and Google, where then J&J has an option and exercise their option to buy that asset. You saw Medtronic do some things with Blackstone. We're in discussions at Verinex with a lot of the strategics to take some of their R&D projects, clinical or regulatory projects. We'll do them using our capital and or private equity, with then the entity having some ability to buy that back and do it as an off-balance sheet transaction. So I think they want to innovate more. They want to find creative ways to innovate. And so if you're a small startup today, I've recommended to a couple of people, I'd be trying to partner with a VC to then go do some kind of structured deal with a major strategic. Look at what like Duke Roland is doing with Cordis, and him and Scott Drake with Cordis X, and saying, hey, we want to fund some things. We want to have some opportunities to put those together that then they become part of the growth engine on top of this franchise of Cordis from a distribution standpoint and footprint with really strong market positions, but they need some other growth engines on top of that as they go forward. So four different things I see the larger strategics doing today.
Interesting, and it's interesting to hear that, because I feel like one exciting thing is we saw that J&J spun out MedTech, 3M spun out their MedTech division as well, and so you see these strategics being a little bit more nimble. Something that that was reported from last year was that pre-market approval deals were down, and a lot of people are preferring these 510K deals, and so what I'm wondering is like for founders who are early stage pre-market approval, who are having difficulty with first financing, do you feel that what they need to start doing is engaging strategics earlier on to help fund the development of these technologies in the PMA category?
My recommendations are pursue all options. And, I've had a couple of deals where these guys, Mavi, M-A-V-I-E, that, are great consultant kind of investment bankers for China, can help you raise some off balance sheet, non-dilutive financing for China. Now China was on in a big way, then it was off. Now it's kind of tepid again. So you pursue those kind of opportunities, China, or whether it's, Japanese distribution, you pursue strategics, you pursue VCs, you pursue family offices. I think when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting a business, you just have to be, paranoid and have a fire in your belly that you're going to figure out things, and it's not going to be perfect. And let's not do something where there's no value at the end of the day for investors or you as a founder, but, live to fight another day, hit milestones where there's value creation. And I, recommend pursuing all options. And a lot of times people have said, oh, I don't know if I want a strategic this early in my deal. All of the things I've, done as a CEO, back to Digirad, we had GE and J&J as major investors. We had both Medtronic and J&J in Volcano, and then partnered with, in Japan with J&J, partnered with GE and Philips, and had distribution agreements and funding that came from them that was non-dilutive, from Fukuda for Japan and Goodman for Japan. So I think you have to, be thoughtful, creative, and realize, it's unlikely. There's only 10 or 20% maybe of the situations where you're going to get a perfect financing done, and have to be flexible, but not do something that really constrains your ability to create value going forward.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that considering how maybe 10 years ago, is a little bit more of a linear approach to how you raise money. You go and raise some, from angels first, then you go to some maybe late stage VCs, and then you bring in a strategic. Your advice to these to founders is like, from day one, you should be pursuing all paths, because I think it's going to be different for everybody, considering how the investor market has kind of turned out the last couple of years. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so in general, but understand the strategics. I mean, you don't just go to all 8 of them. It's, hey, if I have this kind of device, this would be of interest to these 3 people. So, hey, number 1, I want you to be aware of us, and we may be raising money. So here you have an understanding to be able to track. We want to share, with you. We're complementary, we're synergistic, sometimes competitive next generation. And if there comes a time where there's an interest in being more involved, let's talk about it. Be open to it. If they come with an opportunity, you can always say no if you have better options from VCs, family offices, angels, et cetera. But having options also gives you negotiating capability and power with a VC, because you can say, well, I can take this money from these people as well. So you can't be kind of held up by them.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I want to pivot for a second. Something that I found that was interesting, the continuous glucose monitoring sector is really fascinating to me. Dexcom posted its first $1 billion quarter, and then they mentioned the rollout of a new sensor, which was called Strella. And the purpose of this sensor is it's actually more of a health-focused tracker that's sold as a consumer device and aimed at people with type 2 diabetes who don't use insulin. I bring this up because I think post-COVID, the last few years, there's been more and more consumer interest in their health and devices. And, I've seen, even myself, number of third-party apps who are selling continuous glucose monitoring devices for like $200, $300 a month to consumers. I'm wondering, do you feel like that trend in the consumer space with devices is going to have some sort of effect in deep med device on things that we normally don't see consumer interest in? Or do you think that's just, sort of by itself?
No, look, you and I have talked for a number of years here that there are 30 technologies. When I was back on the Google campus at Verb, and they would monitor them as part of the Google X program, there were 30 technologies that were going through, and still every year they report on this, that are going to have 10 times improvement over the next 10 years. 10 times either more capability, lower cost, smaller size. And this has everything from Moore's law to connectivity times to data storage to sensors, et cetera. All of those technologies create incredible opportunities for different ways of doing and delivering healthcare. That was back to my opening statements about med device and these technologies enabling new service models, telehealth, being one. At this service meeting last week, it's like, how do we turn the home into an extension of the hospital, from everything from video monitoring of gaits to speech patterns to estimating your weight just upon how you look. I mean, if you have sensors on your body that can measure everything from gait to movement to heart rates to pulse oximetry, your blood pressure and everything else. And people are using these things for dietary reasons, to see how their body reacts to different foods, and the like, for those Dexcom kind of sensors. So yeah, I see all kinds of different possibilities when you look at and say, hey, I want to take a look at these 30 technologies and how they're going to improve so that they become more cost effective or size appropriate or computing power enabling, to create these new opportunities as we move forward here. So I think, whether that's monitoring and diagnosis as kind of the high level, funnel, having that information is going to better inform what drugs we take, compliance of those drugs, effectiveness of those. You take Elucid, where I'm on the board. Look, we, FFRCT with HeartFlow, and now what we're doing with FFRCT and plaque is focused initially on saying, hey, this is a faster, cheaper, easy, better way to do nuclear cardiac stress testing. But really, one step or two steps higher up is for it to become like a colonoscopy, like mammography. Every 50-year-old, every 60, you get this test done, and it's managing not just your cardiac, flow from an anatomy and physiology standpoint with plaque, but it also is looking at all your structural heart issues, aortic stenosis, which is underdiagnosed if you're Edwards and you're trying to find people who have it to better treat them, triple A's, you're looking at your carotids, looking at your brain. Now you can start doing a screening test that happens that in asymptomatic patients to determine, hey, they have an issue that needs intervention. But as important, if not more important, is that coupled with some genetic testing tells you how do you optimize their pharmacologic therapeutic care with all these new drugs that keep coming on the market. It's not just cholesterol lowering statins anymore. You have a wider array, and now you have the tools to really look at that and manage things. So I think we're going to see more and more of those kind of passive devices like you're talking about that monitor you, whether it's in your home, on your body, or tests that, like an elucid test that measure cardiac care, that then inform and can democratize access earlier in disease prevention or in managing a lot of these things more as chronic diseases versus episodic catastrophic events, whether that's finding cancer late or having a heart attack or having a brain aneurysm, as an example.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I want to pivot into one of, at least I think, one of the topics that you and I really connected on, which is surgical robotics. So when we look at last year in terms of the largest deals in med device, maybe not surprising, I guess we don't think of it like this, but the largest deal that happened last year was Neuralink at $323 million. But number 2 and number 3 for deals was CMR Surgical at $165 million, Distal Motion with $153 million. And I'm wondering overall, I think that robotics saw sort of a, not a slump, but for the last few years, minus last year, we didn't see a lot of activity in the robotics space. And it feels like starting from last year, something changed in the market. Is that just me? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like investors are starting to get more interest again in robotics now?
I think that there's a lot of robotic companies that got funded, in the 3 or 4 years ago, and this is the continuation of some of the more successful companies getting funding. You name CMR and Distal Motion as examples of that. I think there's a little more care being given because it's some particular verticals have gotten a little more crowded, and so hey, you had the first generation intuitives, then you have these second generation technologies now, and it's, hey, if I'm going to fund something, I got to be thinking about, is this a third generation building off what those companies, they started probably in 2017 and 18. Now we're in 2024, and if I'm funding something earlier stage, it has to build on where the market is going and what could be a proper product market fit. So I think that there's multiple elements to what we called back in 2015 digital surgery, or we called digital precision guided therapy at Volcano, that involves robotics, involves connectivity, involves AI and advanced instruments, and the convergence of all of those coming together to create a new solution. So you take On Target, or I'm on the board, that has fluorescent imaging agents to light up cancer for surgery. And our first product is in lung. Well, as lung cancer surgery goes to minimally invasive, now you can't palpate the lung when you're doing it robotically and minimally invasively. So if I can't touch and feel, I need to be able to see or and the like. So imaging agents coupled with minimally invasive, coupled with robot, allow a new model to exist for that surgery, which is less invasive, less costly, democratized from a performance standpoint, because you can see more of the cancer and make sure that you remove it and maintain more of the lung volume. As examples, the same way that an iPhone, a cellular phone plus GPS enabled there to be Uber. If Uber, would have relied on your PC in your house, like, not that great. Same thing with an Airbnb, same thing with a Strava, same thing, multiple different examples. So that's back to these 30 technologies. Look at them. How do you put these 5 together to enable there to be something that can have more access, lower cost, or, a better democratization of a solution that improves outcomes? That's where I see, I would say, I said at the time, robotic surgery was kind of surgery 3.0. We needed to get to 4.0, which is the robot plus some of the advancements in these other areas that would be complementary. And that might be using a robot, in an open surgery, not just, historically how Intuitive has used it in a minimally invasive surgery based upon better control and the like. So that's what I get excited about, is like imaging agents, AI, co-registrations, heads-up displays, all these things coming together. And that might mean that, Stryker has 2/5 of the solution, On Target has 1/5, and Intuitive has 2/5, or Medtronic or J&J. And then a Proximie may be, a platform technology that connects all 5 of those to create the ultimate solutions that are scalable from a global standpoint, like connectivity. I was just on the phone with Vip Patel, who's done almost 20,000, prostatectomies. And, they're working on programs in China and Rwanda and others to do, telesurgery. And that's going to become a reality here in the next 5 to 10 years, where people are able to do things remotely, and we're able to, lean into that vision we've had for a while of getting access to surgery past the 1.5, 2 billion people who have access to it today, to all 7.5 billion people as we go forward.
Got it. What do on the robotics front, like one of the companies that was interestingly enough had their Series B led by NVIDIA was Moon Surgical. At JP Morgan, the one talk that I saw pictures of that people were all clamoring to go watch was the NVIDIA talk, and how NVIDIA is kind of bringing their AI solutions to med device. How do you think that's going to affect the market when it comes to investment and just the med device market as a whole? Because, we heard about AI for the last 5 years, but like everybody talked about it. Very few companies really had something to say. And now it feels like there's more of an opportunity to incorporate those kind of things into your own technologies.
Yeah, I think it's the most exciting, promising, area. If I look at the shelves behind me, there's 5 books on AI that, I've read one a month for the last 3 months, and I have 2 more to read, and looking at, online course stuff to do. I just think, it's like, 1997, 1998 again, where you had to learn, what the internet was going to do, or you're going to be completely disrupted and blown away. And that's the way it's everything from AI within the business. So, hey, how do I use AI to improve my operations, to improve my decision making as a medical company? How do I do clinical trial work and analysis? And how do I do financial analysis? All of those things, how do I incorporate AI to be faster, cheaper, better relative to, your solutions? Just like everybody was offshoring manufacturing. At Volcano, Boston was making their products somewhere else. We had to move to Costa Rica if we wanted to compete. Like, I've got to incorporate AI into my business operations if I want to be able to compete going forward. Then into the product side, even more important relative to, again, that's one of the key 30 technologies that's going to have probably not a 10 times, more like 100 times improvement in the next 10 years as we move forward here. So, when I talk with my daughter, who's finishing her residency right now, 3 years ago when she started, I said, how often do you and the other residents and doctors use Google? Oh, we use Google every single day. Every single day we Google all kinds of things. And so then I said, well, now how are you using ChatGPT? Oh, it's like 100 times better than Google. It's just part of what we do and how we practice medicine. And if you think about that and how that interfaces with devices and everything else, we're going to be in a whole new world here over the next 10 years, and what's possible relative to information augmentation to physicians relative to our products and to our patients. If it's, like back to a Dexcom and a Tandem relative to glucose monitoring and the like, from food to exercise to just, all of that kind of a circle of information to help manage a chronic disease. Or at a Lucid, what we're doing with these images, not possible 5-10 years ago. Now it's possible because of NVIDIA, because of the chips, because of processing power, because of connectivity, because you looked at 6 or 7 of the things out of those 30, and you're back to this. Now is possible to do this real time on site. This isn't, hey, it takes 2 days. Shoot, back at Digirad, we had nuclear cardiology mobile gamma camera. We did the image, we recorded it on a CD. It was FedExed somewhere. It was read the next day, FedEx back the next day. It was a 3-day process. All of that today, that machine, connected to the cloud, automatic AI, overseen by a physician, and you're talking minutes, not days. That enables a whole different solution to be possible there, as just a couple of examples. So I'm super excited about it. But I hear too many people talking about it on the product side, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing relative to your operations? A lot of people are, we're not letting people use or get on ChatGPT, and I'm like, no, you got to figure out how you let them get on it to operate safely. Software engineering wise, a huge opportunity, obviously, there. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, while the product and technology innovation is really exciting, it's as it pertains to like incorporating LLMs and AI. The other side, just because it's the world that I spend the most time in, which is the commercial side, is to see which companies are going to start implementing this, both on the marketing sales side. I think there's a variety of ways that you can train an LLM like ChatGPT to help, help your sales force be more informed in terms of who they go after. At least me within my company, I'm trying to experiment with these LLMs to feed them data to start, using different, data points such as social media activity, procedure volume, etc., to maybe see if there's a way we can profile and predict who might be a really good early adopter. Because I think, for the longest time, our industry focused on, who's on the podium and who's publishing the most, which I think worked, a while back. Nowadays, we just live in a much more complex market. And it's not always the case that that's the best person to be, at least an early adopter of your technology in terms of somebody who's going to open up a market, provide feedback on product, et cetera. So I'm kind of hoping to see more companies incorporate those kind of things. I think there's like a 0.01% of salespeople who are using ChatGPT, and at least I know most of them because they message me most of the time. But I think that's kind of the exciting part, and I think that there was Steve Case from AOL wrote a book, maybe it might have been 5 or 10 years ago, maybe, about the third wave, about the idea that these days technology is so complex, to really move forward, you have to start looking for more partnerships. Big tech had this, attempt into our industry, 5-6 years ago. Apple, Google, Amazon, and it didn't go as well. They're making that attempt now. Amazon acquired its way in with One Medical. Do you feel like this is the year that we start seeing some not so obvious partnerships between traditional med device and, let's say, these larger big tech companies?
Yeah, I think that like they have value to add, and like an NVIDIA, they're saying, hey, I have this value. How do I own this part of the value chain relative to a solution? And I think Google should be doing the same thing. Amazon should be doing the same thing. Meta, whomever. And if you look at like Qualcomm, like what they did with mobile phones, they're like, hey, we want to own this part of the value chain. And they fought with Apple for years, right? And maintain their license fee and maintain their portion of the value chain that they were creating relative to connectivity with mobile cell phones. I think what Joe Chiani is doing with Massimo against Apple right now is pretty much kind of the same thing. He has the IP, he created this. Don't let just Apple trample on you relative to their objectives. You can buy Massimo, you will license the technology just like you had to license it from Qualcomm. The parallels there are similar. So, we look to partner with NVIDIA, just like on Target, with agents for illuminating cancer. We're partnering with Stryker, who has the camera that illuminates them. It's not really, to me, any different. I would be proactive if I'm a device company looking for where that technology resided. Now, I think, back to 2015 to 17, when there was a lot of noise, Verily and Google Life Sciences, which became Verily, overpromised and underdelivered, and did some large deals with Dexcom and J&J and others, and then didn't live into their portion of the deliverables. And I think they've learned from that. I think it's, hey, where can I fit? Where can I add value? Apple, with their new headset that's coming out, there's opportunities for that in the medical device in applications. So I think those things are just normal. If you think about things, for 50 years, medical devices has leveraged the advancements of technologies from either defense or consumer applications. So, all of Moore's Law and all of that is based upon defense applications, space applications. Chip War is a great book, like kind of going through the history of all of that. And then now that computing power now enables there to be an MRI machine. That enables you to do X, Y, and Z as you move forward. So we don't have in most instances, the size of markets to warrant the investments that create NVIDIA chips for AI. Other things do, but then we can then, benefit from it and take it and put it into our smaller portion of the industries.
Yeah, and I think we see it on, let's say, on the software side, where you could be, software is sort of historically known as not a great place to build an IP, moat. It just doesn't really happen. And it used to be that you can have a SaaS company that goes to market and they have a defensible market for a few years before competitors come out. But in the last few years, with these large language models, with no code tools and everything, a lot of these companies are being disrupted within like a matter of months, right? And so I'm wondering if, we'll see more startups being able to sort of move their timelines up a little bit more, as since they have access to these kind of tools. You mentioned using these LLMs for like clinical research and operations and everything. So I'm hoping to see more of that. I have a question. Something interesting that happened, Limflow, and then I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Relievant. Sometimes our industry has really tough names to pronounce. So they had down rounds in 2022 and 2023, but then they had these great exits in 2023. Last year, we didn't see a lot of new financing rounds. We saw a lot of insider raises happening. Do you think those are going to serve as catalysts to sort of encourage new VCs to make new mid to late investments in 2024? Because that was the one thing that we didn't see a whole lot of last year. Do you feel like that's going to change this year?
I think the capital is available and out there. I think a lot of VCs have moved to that portion of the market where people are commercial, they're ramping commercial. It's a little bit lower risk. And you're seeing those kind of transactions happen right now. It's very deal dependent. I think to make grand statements, sometimes you miss the forest from the trees. I mean, you build, successful companies that are getting adopted by the market, and they get funded, and that usually means that there's 4 or 5 people, strategics, that might be interested in buying them. Back to our earlier statements about trying to raise their weighted average growth rate of markets they're in, and or having complementary bolt-ons to distribution channels and manufacturing facilities where it creates operating leverage. So yeah, I mean, if you got something that has enough scale and it's into a big enough market that it can go public, as well as, there's 4 or 5 strategics that would find the asset beneficial to solving the growth equation that we just outlined, then you're not going to have problems, getting funding. I think a company like Capel, where I'm on the board, where we just launched, our new stroke product. We're growing. The market is huge. It's a company that can continue to grow and go public. Or, there's 5 or 6 different players in that growing market that would find that asset attractive. We're not having problems having meetings and getting people interested in this next round of financing, and I see that across a number of other examples right now as well.
Got it. So overall, I mean, just as we
look, there's a lot of exciting spaces, and there's plenty of opportunities. So I'm optimistic.
What are some spaces you're personally excited about? Because your portfolio kind of spans across a lot of different sectors. What are some areas that you're excited about for this year?
Yeah, I mean, across cardiac. Look, I'm on the board at Acutus, but you look at all the companies in pulse field ablation, and a number of success stories with the progression of the first generation of those technologies, having positive clinical results, being acquired by the Bostons and the Medtronics of the world. And now those technologies are getting regulatory approval. You have second generations of those technologies that are getting funded and progressing. Now, those are going to create some level of improvement in outcomes, but then there's a number of kind of advanced mapping, imaging, AI co-registration. And it reminds me a lot of the Volcano stent days where, okay, drug-eluting stents were going to solve everything. Well, no, they did. They improved outcomes, but to really get to the right patient, the right therapy, it needed to be precision guided as well. So I see EP is not going to continue to have 55 to 60% success rates and take over an hour to do these cases. In 10 years, it's going to be less than a half an hour, and you're going to have 95% success rates, and it's because of these advances that will take place. That's very similar to what's going to happen and is happening with stroke. It's also what's happening in spine, like Globus and NuVasive coming together. I was on the board there. You take advanced imaging, AI, better tools, flip a coin whether your spine surgery 5 years ago was going to be effective relative to relieving pain and the like. Now we're in the 60s, and I think over the next 10 years with robotics, with better imaging of nerves and other capabilities and information with precision guidance and advancements in the actual tools, we're going to get to 90% plus success rates. So in all of those, there's opportunities for companies to continue to improve a number of these spaces where the success rates are in the 60s to get them up over 90, and or make it so that each physician can deliver in the 90s, not just, the best physicians can deliver in the 90s. The average ones are in the 50s because they don't have some of the capability. So how do I democratize outcomes with some of these tools, diagnostics, guidance, as well?
Got it. So,
J&J bought
Laminar,
like we talked about, and there's going to be 4 or 5 competitors in that space with different flow characteristics, different size profiles, and we're going to have better clinical data sets, both for high-risk PCI, cardiogenic shock. Cardion's a board that I'm on in that space, but there's other great companies developing technology there that are near term in the next few years going to be commercializing, and they'll be targets for either the strategics and or this later stage financing as as well.
Got it. I was gonna say, as we kind of like wrap things up, any predictions for 2024?
Boy, oh boy. Any predictions for 2024? I am trying to stay away from predicting anything relative to November in order to maintain some semblance of normalcy in my house with my wife and daughters
Do you
and others. But
let,
as far as MedTech goes, I think, you're going to, I hope for a nice, healthy, progression. There's going to be some M&A activity. It's not going to be crazy, but it'll be positive. I think you're going to see some divestitures that can be positive for some private equity side of things. Venture is going to be open for business and funding good quality deals, and I think that all of those are positive. I don't foresee, IPO markets opening up, given interest rates, given elections, given those things. There might, hopefully, maybe some of these companies that have gone public have some successes, and we start seeing some secondary offerings and the like, which you've seen a little bit of, and that usually is a precursor to what ends up happening. So
got
I
it.
think it'll be a good, solid year. Look, these earnings reports that the strategics are putting out and their growth and the like are very solid, very
Mhm.
positive, and that's a good, halo effect for the whole industry and the funding. Because when they're successful and they're growing and they're producing income, their stock prices are doing well, then they historically have been more active on the investing and or M&A front.
I totally agree. And one last thing, you just reminded me, there's something specific I wanted to ask you about. So, like, when we look at Intuitive, they are, I believe, 25 or 26% up in terms of their procedures year over year, and then their revenue was up 14%. So recently, someone told me this, and I was like, no, there's no way that can be, but it's correct. And I googled it right now. It's live. So this is real. We look at Medtronic. Medtronic has thousands of products, and Medtronic's market cap right now is $113 billion. Intuitive, which really has just two products, right? Technically, is at 130 billion market cap. What does that mean to you? How do you look at something like that? Because, like, for me, that was just shocking.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. If you look at the market cap of Edwards, look at the market cap of ResMed, um, you know, these look at the market cap of Dexcom. Large markets with very high gross margins and profitability create disproportionate returns, software-like returns in some instances, and therefore dominant market positions that are sustainable. So, I think Medtronic pursued a strategy, right or wrong, with their inversion and tax and value, were the statements of Omar over the years, which weren't wrong, but I think they lost part of their innovation, uh, culture and DNA as part of that relative to the scale and having so many different markets they were in. So I think, what they've been trying to do with some divestitures to, again, get more focused, get their weighted average growth rate higher relative to the markets they're in, where they have strong positions and have that focus, they'll be able to create more shareholder value. Um,
Got it.
so I
That
think
makes
I think Dexcom, Intuitive, ResMed, Edwards are great examples that you don't have to diversify, to be successful. Um, you look at companies like Inari and Penumbra who are behind them. That as long as your market's big enough for you to keep growing, why diversify? I think we talked about before, like Volcano, you start being 70%, 60, 70% market share in a market, and then you become the market. And and if the market's only growing this much, Intuitive is still, only a small portion of all of surgeries. So
That's right.
they're completely underpenetrated. Um, and as they continue to drive the benefits of their technologies, cost wise, outcome wise, et cetera, they have a lot of room to continue to grow.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it'll be interesting to see, especially
Same
with.
thing with Dexcom, same thing with ResMed. Sleep apnea completely still underpenetrated. Diabetes, we'll see what happens with GLP-1 inhibitors. People can't afford them for number
Ah,
one. So that's a big, prediction for the year is what's going to happen there. More and more people are going to take them, but when is it going to get to where it's cost effective for someone not to do it for 3 months, then have to be off, save up money to buy a 3-month, off insurance? That's like, at some point they become like statins out in the future where they're generic, but this interim time, super interesting to see what happens and the effect that has on medical devices. So my prediction is we're going to have a lot more data and insight on that this year. As I'm looking down my list of things I was going to mention, that was one that I overlooked, but is a significant
yeah.
one for all of us.
It's interesting with GLP-1. I think they talked to Stryker about this, which was there was concern that when people are on GLP-1, it would reduce the number of procedures being done in orthopedic space. And on the contrary, the folks over at Stryker, and I think a few other orthopedic companies said that they actually disagree that, when more people start taking GLP-1s and losing weight, they are now candidates for surgery. And so I wonder if that's going to have a larger sort of halo effect within the industry of more people being qualified for certain procedures,
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. Think about it for dental. It's like, hey, if people are living longer, they're likely to get more implants, because they're going to live longer. Or if someone's going to live longer on a GLP-1, more people that are going to need hips and knees.
That's a good point. I never thought. I didn't.
You're living, the cheap, the cheapest patient is the dead patient. It's a bad thing to say, but it's a truism. And so as people live longer, and you make cancer and cardiac chronic diseases, now you're seeing all the byproducts of that with Alzheimer's and dementia and a lot more people. But those are like in their 80s and 90s and the like. But you're also going to see people who stay active, hopefully more and longer. And if you're active, you're going to be willing to get a knee. You're going to be willing to get a hip. You're willing to do these things. If you're not active, it's like, why do I want to put myself through getting a hip? So I think there's all kinds of unintended consequences and outcomes where we're going to get more clarity here in the next couple of years. But no matter what, it's fantastic. It's incredible. It's real. There are second and third generation products coming in the spaces. They're going to be highly beneficial for people as we move forward. And that's what we all have as our goal, to improve patient outcomes. And they're going to be a big part of that. And how do we measure that to continue to improve is going to be interesting.
Absolutely. And I think like the big thing about last year when I saw that there was less investments being deployed, the first thing I thought is like more, patients are going to suffer as a result of it. And I think you're absolutely right. I'm excited for this year, especially coming out of JP Morgan. It's even though we are in an election year, I think that we have a lot to be hopeful about, and there's gonna be some exciting times this year. Well, Scott, I want to thank you for, spending some time to come on the show. I'll see you again in January next year. But in the meantime, are you going to be going to LSI USA this year?
Unfortunately, I'm not. I've got a couple board meetings on the East Coast, so I'm not. And it's a great meeting, and I always enjoy it and leave energized. Scott Pentel and that group have done a great job putting that together. It's a real service to the industry. A lot of information sharing, relationship building, and investments come out of it. But I'm also looking forward to following up with you on your 5-year plan.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. We're gonna talk about that offline, and then I'm gonna have you back on the show soon just to talk about that. Because I think a lot of not just founders and entrepreneurs, but salespeople, execs are going to benefit about that, because it's not something that they don't teach you those things in school. So, well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to thank the listeners for following. Be sure to follow Scott on LinkedIn, as he is active on there in posts. And don't forget, subscribe to the show. We have a lot of episodes that don't get publicly posted on LinkedIn. So you have to just subscribe to the show. It's free. Just click that subscribe button right now on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, and be sure to give us 5 stars. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of The State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has a executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@katibandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.